So I'm going to take a brief break from the kinds of conversations that we've been having, and we'll be getting back to those shortly. I shot quite a few videos in a batch, and there are more of those yet to come, to help out a friend at her request, Divinity series of numbers that I don't remember, series of numbers, is talking about pre-colonialism, colonialism, its impact on race relations in contemporary American culture, driven by attempts at extra-cultural definition, people outside of a particular cultural subset, trying to tell people within that subset what their culture should mean. And yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem, and a problem so ubiquitous it's difficult to isolate. I mean, that happens. That's kind of how we do things. But a couple of comments, really quickly. I don't usually talk about this very much, and there's a specific reason why. Tim Wise, who, if you're not familiar with his work, I thoroughly recommend it. Thoroughly recommend it. And the reason that he is the reason that I don't talk about this stuff very much is that he says a lot of what I would say a hell of a lot better than I would be able to say it. So you can find a lot of his lectures on YouTube, especially his lecture on the history of white privilege, is well worth taking a look at. So, yeah, I would say start there. It's not a complete perspective, but it's certainly an informative and helpful one. Next bit that I would share, my favorite example of how deeply distorted contemporary perceptions of race relations in American history are. Or rather, the degree to which our perception of race and racial division is contemporary. How recent an idea this white thing actually is. The banjo. I love the banjo. I love the banjo as an illustrative device. I'm also pretty fond of pretty fun. Anyway, the banjo. Okay, it's contemporary culture. It's as regarded as white gets. You know, as instruments go, it's as white gets. Most of the music that we associate with the banjo is either directly derived from or heavily based on Irish melodic structure. The melodies that we find in traditional Irish music. And we usually kind of passively attribute a like origin to the instrument itself. Here's the catch. The banjo isn't an Irish instrument, traditionally. It's not a European instrument, traditionally. It came from Africa. The banjo came from Africa. It's an African instrument. So how do we wind up with Irish music on an African instrument? It's not hard to piece it together at all. It's not hard to piece it together. If we just remember that for much of the 20th century, it was entirely acceptable for businesses that were hiring to post signs in their front window saying Irish need not apply. This musical cross-pollination occurred as the result of peoples of like socioeconomic standing. This is part of our history, and that musical cross-pollination, kind of at the bottom, the lowest strata of socioeconomic standing, material and political empowerment, that cross-pollination has defined America's musical contribution to world history. That is the American sound. The American sound that we later hear in blues, we later hear in rock and roll, going forward from there. The cross-pollination of African rhythmic structures and Irish melodic structures. It happened here. And that is how it happened. Cohabitation, living in the same communities. Swapping licks with the guy next door. So that's I think an interesting piece. But something that Divinity was talking about very specifically was the idea of contemporary conversion as sort of an ongoing form of cultural conquest, like convert to Christianity and let us tell you what your cultural identity should be. This is something. This is honestly a hobby horse of mine. This is something that I think about quite a lot. That drives me nuts. What we generally think of as Christianity, what Christianity looks like, how Christianity is practiced, what the communities and the culture and the behavior surrounding Christianity or Christian conversion or Christian community is not actually even remotely representative of Christianity. Not even in America. When we think of generally, when we draw up the Christian stereotype, we tend to something like Ned Flanders, and the thing is, that's certainly not representative. That's certainly not representative of the cultural footprint of Christianity as a whole. It's not even really representative of the cultural footprint of Christianity in America. If you step into a predominantly Asian American faith group, there's a Korean Methodist church right down the block from where I am. It's a very, very different kind of liturgy. It's a different kind of worship service, and it is, it's a very different kind of Christianity in how doctrine influences and shapes behavior, how people interact. It's different, of course. Of course it's different. What I find especially perverse about this proposed, this attempted conquest that Divinity was justifiably pissed off about, is the idea of proposing and imposing the Ned Flanders kind of take on Christianity onto ethnic and heritage groups that already have a really, really well-defined relationship with Christianity historically, and a very culturally distinct one. This is, well, I'm going to have to do a second video about this. So there will be a second video about this.